Have you ever stopped to think about how we got here? I mean, how we went from a planet with just a few million people scattered all over the place to one with over 8 billion of us today? Well, that story, it's one of the most incredible tales in all of human history, and understanding it is absolutely key to understanding our world right now. Just to put this into perspective, think about this number for a second. 6 billion. That's the milestone our global family crossed back in 1999. For almost all of human history, a number that big would have been completely unimaginable. So the big question is, how on earth did this happen so fast? The answer? It turns out is all about a fundamental concept that actually governs all life on this planet, from the tiniest bacteria all the way up to us. And that core idea is something called population dynamics. Now, I know it sounds a little technical, but it really just boils down to two very simple things: births and deaths. That's it. And when you plot the history of our population using just those two factors, you get a really distinct and honestly a pretty dramatic shape. And this is the shape of our story, the J-curve. This is the visual anchor for everything we're going to talk about. You see, for almost all of human history, our population was just kind of bumping along that long, flat base at the bottom. Growth was incredibly slow. Then, in what's really just a blink of an eye in historical terms, something happened that just launched us straight up the vertical part of that curve. So let's break down what was going on at each stage. All right, so let's jump in. We're going to start way back at the beginning, on that flat, stable base of the J-curve. This is a time when the human population was small, and it grew very, very slowly for thousands and thousands of years. This timeline here is basically our roadmap. And as you can see, for the vast, vast majority of human existence, we were living in that very first stage as hunter-gatherers. So back then, life was all about being on the move. As hunter-gatherers, people had to follow their food sources. This kind of nomadic lifestyle really favored having small families, because they're just easier to move around. And because of that, the total human population just kind of hovered at only a few million people. But then, everything changed. The last ice age ended, the climate shifted, and a lot of the large animals people used to hunt started to disappear. This forced a massive change in how we lived. We went from a life on the move to a more settled agricultural one. And this is where things get really interesting, because farming completely flipped the script on what a family should look like. In a nomadic life, more kids could be a burden. But when you settle down to farm, a large family becomes a huge asset. You need more hands to work the fields, to tend to the home, and this fundamental change is what started that slow, steady climb of our population. So, for thousands of years after we started farming, growth was pretty slow, pretty steady. But then, just a couple of centuries ago, bam, we hit that sharp, almost vertical part of the J-curve. Around the early 1800s, something incredible happened. For the first time in history, the human population hit 1 billion people. So what was the catalyst for this unbelievable acceleration? Well, it was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution basically created the perfect storm for population growth. With factories popping up, children suddenly became a labor resource. At the exact same time, new technology was making food way more plentiful, and huge medical advances meant people stopped dying from diseases that used to be a death sentence. The death rate just plummeted, but birth rates stayed high, and boom, a population explosion. Now, as this started happening in country after country, economists and demographers started to notice a predictable pattern taking shape. There's actually a model that describes this whole journey, and it really helps explain the different population trends we see all over the world today. This is the second major concept you'll want to know: the demographic transition. The best way to think about it is as a 4-stage journey that pretty much every developed nation has gone through, moving from a state of high growth to one of low, stable growth. So this model, it's a fantastic way to see the whole journey. You start in stage 1, where life is tough, and high birth rates are pretty much canceled out by high death rates. Then you hit stage 2, where things get better, food, medicine, so the death rate falls. That's your population explosion. But then in stage 3, as societies get more urban and educated, the math changes again. Big families get expensive, so the birth rate starts to fall. And finally, you get to stage 4, where everything stabilizes at a low level. Let's look at this a little more visually. In that pre-industrial stage, the bars for birth rates and death rates are both really high, and they're about equal. Life is tough, so even though a lot of babies are born, a lot of people also die young. The two basically cancel each other out and the population stays stable. Now let's jump ahead and compare that to the post-industrial stage. Here, people have access to great healthcare, education, you name it. Living standards are way higher, so birth rates are low and death rates are low. They're balanced again, leading to stable or, in some cases, even shrinking populations. Okay, and here's the really crucial thing to get. Not every country is in the same stage of this transition today. Our one global population story is actually a whole bunch of different stories, all happening at different speeds. This table here, even though the data's from 2000, it paints a super clear picture. On one side, you have highly industrialized nations that are pretty much in stage 4, with very low or even negative growth. On the other ends, you have developing nations that might be in stage 2 or 3, where death rates have dropped, but birth rates are still high, and that means rapid population growth. Now, if there's one thing you really need to lock in from all this, it's this idea right here. The huge population boom of the last century wasn't because people suddenly started having way more babies. Not at all. It's because the babies that were born were surviving into adulthood and living much, much longer lives, all thanks to better food, sanitation, and medicine. All right, I know that was a ton of info, so let's boil it all down to the key takeaways. You know, the stuff you'll definitely want to have in your back pocket for any quizzes or presentations. So you might be asking, okay, why do birth rates eventually fall? Well, think of it like a balancing act. On one side of the scale, you have things like the traditional need for family labor and certain cultural beliefs. But on the other side, you have the costs and opportunities of modern life, the high expense of education, more career opportunities for women, all of it. And as a country develops, the scale tips toward that modern side, and families naturally get smaller. Seriously, if you walk away with just 2 things from this whole explainer, make it these: the J-curve and the demographic transition. The J-curve shows you the shape of our population history, and the demographic transition model gives you the 4-step process that explains exactly why that shape happened. And that really brings us to where we are now, and what's coming next. You see, the same forces that caused our population growth to stabilize are now creating a world where the average person is getting older. This massive demographic shift is going to reshape our economies, our healthcare systems, and our societies, leaving us with a whole new set of fascinating questions to explore.